Is it possible to heal someone from a distance with nothing more than a thought? Interesting idea. Sounds a little bit out there and a little bit woo woo. Sure, we've had examples like the Bible where Jesus would just lay hands on someone and heal them. And Jesus did say, "This and greater things ye shall do." But most of us are like, I think I'd rather go to the doctor, get the prescription, and feel a little bit better for the things I've got going on. But what happens when we get to that point where the Western allopathic model of medicine says, we've done all we can for you. There's just nothing more in our science and research that allows us to give you the healing that you're looking for. Very sorry about that. Is there something else that's possible? In 1991, a group of scientists got together and decided to do peer review level research on something that had never been explored before, which was, is anything happening between heartbeats? We had looked at the heartbeat forever, sinus rhythm and ba-boom, ba-boom, and we could tell from that electromagnetic signature whether the heart was doing well or whether it needed some support. But this idea of something happening between heartbeats? And what they discovered was a medical breakthrough. In fact, there is a tremendous amount of electromagnetic activity happening between heartbeats, and we can measure heart health. But as it turns out, we can begin to affect the people around us as well by nothing more than shifting the frequency of our heart. How does this work? Between heartbeats, you have an electromagnetic signature that we can measure. When the heart is optimal, we call that a coherent frequency, and that is measured by looking at heart rate variability. The sine wave looks like a smooth wave rolling on the ocean. This, turns out, is a signal to our brain. As we thought before this, everything starts here and affects our physiology. Absolutely not true. 90% begins in the heart. 90% of your body and the health you feel begins in the heart. So if you have that coherent frequency, that sends a signal to your amygdala and insula that the environment is safe. You now stop producing cortisol and everything in your body begins to open up to healing because you're not worried about survival. You realize, yeah, I'm totally safe. If, however, that signal is incoherent, which looks like a seismograph during an earthquake, it's pretty dramatically opposite of the smooth one. That particular sine wave sends a signal up to the amygdala and insula that the environment is not safe. And we send a signal over to that hippocampus and we go, warning, Will Robinson, danger, danger. And we are no longer safe in our environment. So now we begin producing the stress hormone cortisol, which breaks our body down. Okay, so what? What does that have to do with healing at a distance? Well, the Institute for Heart Math decided, let's take a look at, could my heart affect your heart with nothing more than my presence? So they did an experiment where they put a person in a room who had an incoherent heart frequency, and that's it. They just told them, sit there. Don't do anything. That's your job. 3 people were out in a hallway practicing a breathwork technique that I teach on this channel. Tons of it out there. Go research it. There's a lot of it. The breathwork moves you into parasympathetic restoration, optimal heart rate variability, and a coherent heart signal, which is now being thrown out around us in our field of electromagnetic energy. We all have it. We can measure it. The 3 people didn't know what this experiment was other than to get themselves into the heart frequency they had trained for, coherence. They then were told, go in the room, sit down, and do nothing more than stay in a coherent frequency. So they did that. And the person in the room, without any interaction, no hands-on, shifted into a coherent frequency. They went from incoherent to coherent because the field of the other people affected their field without touch. So then the question becomes, well, if they could shift someone into a healing frequency, because that's what coherence does. When we are coherent, the body heals. period. That's how it works. Would distance and time matter? So they started researching this idea of something called non-locality. In other words, could my thoughts affect someone thousands of miles away? And you think to yourself, come on, Roger, you're really stretching here. Really? Am I? Have you ever had the moment in time where you thought about someone and then they called you? Or you call them and they go, yeah, I was just thinking about you. Have you ever had the idea where, gosh, man, this person I love, something's wrong. I just know something's wrong. And you call them up and sure enough, they're having a very intense experience. We call that intuition. And for those of us who are true skeptics, we go, it's just coincidence. Is it? It turns out it's not. We have access to other people's frequency by simply thinking about them. So would it be possible for a person who understood this and trained in heart coherence frequencies to then project a healing thought to another person, just like the people walked into the room with a coherent frequency and shifted someone into coherence? Could this happen regardless of time and space? As a matter of fact, it can. And we've had tons of research on this. Check out the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote The Biology of Belief. Greg Braden, a researcher who has done a deep dive into the healing potential of thought to another person without time or space being an issue. Dr. Joe Dispenza, who wrote the books You Are the Placebo and Becoming Supernatural, where all the science is cited. The Institute for Noetic Sciences, run by Dean Radin. The Inner Science Research Institute, all peer-level reviewed science that say this is not a fantasy, this is not a theory, it's not a probability, it is in fact an actuality. And imagine what that means for us. If we found someone who could potentially help us access that for ourselves, or we found someone who's good at this, has been trained in it, and there are many people out there that do this, imagine being able to shift our body's potential to heal with nothing more than thought alone. Now, we know this is absolutely true. Do the research yourself, but I'm here to help you open your mind a little bit to this as a possibility, and then work with someone who can do it so you can tangibly have this experience. I'm pretty sure if you think about your life, you've probably had experiences like this already where you have affected another person or another person has affected you and you weren't in the same physical space. Just expand that thought and you've got the right idea. Turns out the ability to heal someone from a distance is science and absolutely true.